What's behind me is a cargo truck. It's a replica of the vehicle that was used to enslave tomato pickers in our community just 4 years ago, just down the road in Immokalee. It was at that point the 7th case since 1997. There have been 2 more that are now being prosecuted. And in this case, the farms where the workers were taken when they were held against their will supplied their tomatoes to both Whole Foods and to Publix. Now the difference is Whole Foods is signed on to the Fair Food Program, so they immediately cut their purchases from those farms, whereas Publix said that it wasn't their responsibility, that they saw no cause for concern to continue to give their money to 2 farms where federally prosecuted slavery had been uncovered. Dwayne Stevens went on the record in Alabama and he said, quote, "If there's some atrocities going on, it's not our business. Maybe it's something the government should get involved with," unquote. That's what Publix's response was. There are 2 slavery operations in Florida that are still under prosecution, and there's another one that the Coalition of Immokalee Workers is currently investigating. And so it seems like, that it still is an issue, but I think by eliminating the poverty and the powerlessness, which are the root causes of why the extreme of slavery can flourish, we're really putting ourselves in a position where we can hope that incidence will be diminished and that we won't see nearly as much forced labor as we have in years past. Trader Joe's actually, a month before last, became the 10th major retailer to sign on to the Fair Food Program, joining Whole Foods as well as McDonald's, Burger King, Subway, and many others. And what those companies have agreed to do is that they're all willing to pay 1 more penny a pound for their tomatoes, which has the potential to lift tomato pickers' pay by 64%. And these are for workers that haven't seen a real wage increase in decades. And then additionally, all those farms have agreed to only buy their tomatoes from farms that comply with the new Code of Conduct, which ensures that workers are treated fairly, eliminates the practice of the copete, where you had to overfill your tomato bucket. It used to be the case that if you're someone who's been assaulted or propositioned or groped by your crew leader and you spoke up against it, well, then you would lose your job and there's no recourse. But now that's changed. If someone's going to be getting in trouble for that, it's actually the perpetrator, the crew leader, not the actual worker. And so that's one thing that's changed. And also the fact that they've put in the time clocks. That means that workers are guaranteed minimum wage payment for every hour they're on the farm. And whereas in the past, workers had to sit and wait for the dew to dry on the plants every morning before they could actually start harvesting and making their first 50 cents of the day with each bucket that they would pick. Now, many of the farms have pushed back the start of work time because they don't want to pay workers to sit there and wait for the dew to dry. I just think it's incredibly inspiring that you have this instance of some of the most disenfranchised, poorest workers that are leading their own struggle and taking on multi-billion-dollar companies and demanding accountability. And that it's also this model that instead of devoting the efforts to trying to get this third party, try to convince the government to come in and care and persuade the Democrats or the Republicans for that matter to stand up and do something, these farm workers have said, we know who's responsible for our abuse, and it's these multi-billion-dollar retailers that are squeezing their suppliers, demanding artificially low-cost produce, and in turn, the one place that these growers are able to control their costs is what they pay us, their workforce. And so the farm workers have, set their eyes on the target of those that are actually directly responsible for their oppression, and in partnership with people of faith, students, and others, been able to launch these campaigns that hold them accountable. I mean, even just a decade ago, in Fort Myers, just down the road, there were farm workers who stood outside of a Taco Bell and said, all right, we, the farm workers, are having a protest against this company. We want Taco Bell to sign on to our demands. I mean, people must have thought these folks are crazy. I mean, who would have think that a bunch of tomato pickers would be able to persuade a multi-billion-dollar food corporation to concede to all of their demands? Well, it shows the strength of organizing. It shows the importance of us coming together and allowing the people that are directly impacted by oppressive conditions to lead their own struggle and to join with them in solidarity to hold these corporations to account. And so for me, I just think it's incredibly inspiring. Publix is the largest corporation here in Florida. This past year, they made $1.5 billion in profit. A lot of people think it's, our neighborhood grocer. No, it's not. It's a multi-billion-dollar corporation that has its eyes squarely set on profit making. So many people have this soft spot for Publix in their heart. They've seen all these amazingly emotional commercials that Publix has been producing, where you see these commercials and it makes you think of your own family, and it really touches this really special, unique place within ourselves when we see Publix commercials. I am a former customer of Publix. Yeah, I don't much appreciate how Publix has been reacting. And so if you go to Publix, I would encourage you to go to the customer card little box when you walk in there and, fill out a card, let Publix know, ask to speak to the manager and tell her or him that, you've learned about what the coalition is doing and that it's so easy for Publix to pay their penny per pound and to only buy from farms that comply with this code of conduct. There's a lot of farm workers who try to flee agriculture as soon as they can because it's one of the worst jobs out there. Not to mention, low wages, lack of rights, lack of voice for the most part, and the extreme actual slavery as we see with this exhibit here. And not to mention pesticides, having to work in fields that are soaked in carcinogens. So many people do try to flee, but there's many also from the coalition that have said, look, this is dignified labor. Harvesting isn't some job that we need to try to flee from as quickly as we can. We need to stay and do the hard work of helping to improve conditions to eliminate the misapplication of pesticides. We need to stay here and we need to fight so that, Lucas Benitez, who's a colleague with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, has said that he would be proud if his sons chose to work in the tomato fields, that it is dignified labor. And the problem is that it's not compensated fairly and that, workers' dignity is not honored and recognized.